father, Arthur Watres, and my grandmother, Isabel, came to live at Lacawac in 1947, enduring winters in the freezing cold lodge, but relishing the delights of spring, summer, and autumn. After years of neglect during the Great Depression and World War II, there was a lot of work to do. Grading and filling the ruts in the road, patching the roof of the lodge, glazing windows, and restoring the heating system. Together, they put the place back together and made it livable 12 months of the year. Arthur had vigorously avoided earning a degree in engineering, instead preferring painting and sculpture. He was singularly unmechanical. Yet, he bought an old bulldozer to build roads and dig heron and golden ponds. He raised chickens in the carriage house, losing enough money to call himself a professional farmer. In 1951, tired of the drafty lodge in winter, he built the cozy brick house on the bank of Heron Pond. After 2 successive hurricanes in 1955 uprooted thousands of trees in the forest, Arthur set up a sawmill and went into the timber business. Arthur and Isabel read a number of landmark books, such as Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and the works of Henry David Thoreau. They started to think that Lacawac was a place that should be kept the way it is, for people and the environment. But they really had no clue where to start, so they walked unannounced into the American Museum of Natural History in New York, seeking advice. Thankfully, some kind administrator directed Arthur and Isabel to the Philadelphia Academy of Natural Sciences and Dr. Ruth Patrick. One of biology legends, she published scientific papers and texts from 1933 to 2007 when she was 100 years old. In the early 1960s, she made a visit to Lacawac and observed that the lake was unique. Despite the lodge being on its shores, it was likely the southernmost unpolluted glacial lake in the United States, thanks to William Connell's desire to protect lake water for drinking. Arthur opened the doors to researchers from the Academy, and the earliest freshwater biology research on the lake began. Arthur and Isabel pulled together a small board of trustees and incorporated Lacawac Sanctuary in 1966. The first few years were pretty tough. The curators who ran the show back then tended to use Lacawac as their own sanctuary and drop out. It was the 1960s. While Arthur and Isabel changed sheets, filled potholes, and kept the lights on, one early curator milked goats in the basement of the visitors center and failed to turn up to work because he was staying up late to witness the activity of a night-blooming potted cactus. It continued like this through the 1970s. The Lacawac board decided they needed more experienced help. They thought by teaming up with a well-known environmental organization, they could tap into some professionalism. Lacawac negotiated to become a preserve of the Nature Conservancy, and in 1981, Arthur and Isabel sweetened the deal by giving their house on St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands as the nucleus of an endowment. Things looked rosy, but not for long. The professional staff from TNC never came. The work was left to Lacawac's curators, volunteers, Arthur and Isabel, and board members. Soon, there were bigger worries. TNC was shifting its gaze away from its early focus on small, well-appointed preserves with potential for long-term research to large, uninhabited preserves with endangered species or elements to protect. It wasn't hard to do the math. Sell Lacawac for development and you could buy tens of thousands of acres of prairie land out west. Luckily, the Lacawac board was still intact and cooking and cleaning for groups who came to visit. They mobilized a campaign to disengage from the Nature Conservancy, and after long and delicate negotiations, Lacawac was independent once more. This was the early 1980s. It was a time of enormous struggle to plug holes in the budget and build our place in the community. We hosted an amazingly varied summer program: painting and music and conservation schools, naturalist-led walks and boat tours, cultural performances, and evening lectures. Meanwhile, the lodge and ice house filled with scientists. We expanded their workspace to include the coachman's house as an office and added wet and dry labs to the carriage house, including a giant incubator in one of the horse stalls. Through donations and grants, we were also able to grow the size of Lacawac in the 1980s, adding a large stretch of Wallenpaupack lakefront. 3 separate acquisitions totaled more than 120 acres and a mile of shoreline. Despite all the activity, we were always broke. We operated at a deficit every year, begging, borrowing, and selling heirlooms to plug the holes. On a shoestring, our many volunteers, our few staff, our hands-on board members achieved a great deal. Our budget never crossed six figures until around the year 2000.
But there would be a payoff. Greater successes would come. I'm Chad Reed Watres, and this is the History of Lacawac.